You got a way you came in and a way behind you. With that all said, take a deep breath. I'll take a second. Let us begin. This is actually my favorite part right here at the beginning. You've all been talking amongst yourselves, and occasionally I've interjected, trying to draw your attention to say, hey, pay attention to me too. But now you have to. Now you're a rapt audience, and there's nothing an actor loves more than a rapt audience. And you're going to do the things I tell you to do because you're going to be too embarrassed to hide alone by yourself and be the only one not to participate when the audience participation comes around. And some of you are saying right now, oh, there was nothing online about audience participation. I'm so sorry. That's just what happens when you come to the theater. You must be ready to be surprised. And in fact, I would like to begin now. We'll start with an easy one. I'd like to begin this show with a little call and response. So I'm going to say a phrase, and then I'd like you to repeat it after me. And I really hope you say it once you hear what it is with all of the sort of inflection or gravitas that you think it deserves. And if you don't think it deserves any, then humor me. Just perform for a second. I promise it will be relevant. And the phrase is, Lord, let us not forget to be kind.
Lord, let us not forget to be kind.
Let us begin. Those of you who have been reading through the program are probably wondering, well, who's this outsider? Who's this man come from faraway Cape Cod to tell us about the place where we live? So I thought I'd start by sharing my bona fides, just so you know that, at least spiritually, I am one of you. I belong here as well. My whole family, my dad's side of the family, grew up here in Belchertown. My grandmother and my aunts, if you take 3 of the 4 roads outside of this intersection, within 20 minutes you'll be at all their homes. I celebrated most of the Christmases in my life here in this town. I got hypnotized at the World's Fair down on the Common. Not when I was just a teenager. Come join, it's not too late. We're all gonna be on camera eventually, so. I went to school at UMass Amherst, so I had driven this road many times, taking Route 9 all the way down to that dark corner of the Pioneer Valley we call the zoo. And I tell you, I love this place. It means so much to me. It means so much that my family is here. It means so much that when I leave the Cape and head west, I have a place that I can call home. I have a place that I feel safe. I have a place I don't need to use the GPS to get around. Every once in a while when I'm traveling with my wife and I take a strange road, she's just saying, well, I hope this goes the way you say it's going to go. And it usually does, more often than not. But as for Quabbin itself, well, that's special, right? That's a little different. What's my connection there? Well, my biggest connection, of course, is to the Winter Dam itself. Right? Growing up, my cousins and I would get taken out to the dam by my aunt and my uncle, and they would take us to the top. This was back before 9/11 when you could still drive on top of the dam, and they would shoo us out of the car and say, all right, we'll meet you at the bottom. We would hop over the wall and roll all the way down. I was just there today looking down that hill, and I said to myself, oh my God, how did I do that? If I did that now at 35, I would die. I would just tumble and be nothing but dust at the bottom. But it's fun to look back and remember that fun. All of us sort of tumbling down, racing to see who could get the sickest, the fastest at the bottom. And then we get there, and our parents would meet us and say, oh, do you want to go back again? And we'd say, yes, take us back to the top. And they would say, absolutely not. You're going to throw up. And they were right, of course, but still it was fun to imagine. And then they would say, well, come again. We did. Again and again and again until our bodies grew too decrepit. We could no longer make it to the bottom alive. But of course, to get to Windsor Dam, you have to walk by the administration building, right? And that's also connected to me, my life. If you walk back, if you try to sneak to the back of it, I know the state police are there, they won't care. They love people sneaking around there. And you look at the 2nd and the 3rd story windows. Well, that's where my father and his sisters and brother lived. back in the 70s and 80s. My grandfather was the chief engineer for the reservoir, and he was offered a choice: we give you a stipend for a house somewhere in Ware or Belchertown, or you can have this beautiful brick building right on the water for your 5 children, your wife, and your mother. And he said, yeah, I'll take that beautiful building. And so they did. It was so amazing to go there. Even now, when I'm visiting, like, aunts will take me there and say, yeah, that window there, that was the kitchen. That was the quietest window in the house when we snuck out at night. That's the one we use. When my grandmother came to see this show, she hadn't heard that story. So, little family secrets all over the place. But yes, I am connected to this place. It is a part of me. No, I'm not from here, but I am of it. And as you're watching me, and you're watching me walk around, you're probably saying to yourself, okay, we get it. Yes, you've been here. You know what this and that is. What's with all this? This is also an important part of who I am. I am bipolar 1. And that means that I have periods of intense mania, energy that I can't control. And it also means I have these horrible lows, these depressive episodes where I cannot get out of bed. And this, what you see before me, is what it has taken over the last 8, 9, 10 years to keep me going, to get to the point where I can come and perform in front of you today. And I want to stress, this might look scary to some of you, but this is a success story. This is good news because it works. I've been around bipolar people for whom this kind of medicine takes the edge off just a little bit, maybe. And I've been around people for whom it makes no difference at all. For me, it allows me to travel out here and perform with all of you. It allows me to live the life that I want to live. It allows me to be married to the most incredible woman imaginable. It's all thanks to this. But of course, you're here not to hear about this. Although I have more stories. Oh, see, you missed my message to turn off the phone. That's okay. It happens when you're late every time. That's all right. Anytime I'm telling this story of the reservoir, I have to include this for reasons that'll become clear. I have 2 stories to tell you, a story of mania and a story of depression. But first, I have the story of the reservoir itself. If you were there 100 years ago, what would you have seen? If you walked down into the valley, if you took the dirt roads that led to the 4 towns down there, what would you have seen? Well, the first thing you would have seen is beauty. It was gorgeous. You would have said, oh, this place is Edenic. This place is a little slice of paradise. And as you continued walking in there, you would find the communities of Enfield and Prescott and Greenwich and Dana down there, and you would meet the people there, and you would see the beautiful clear streams and ponds, and you would see the woods full of game, and you would see the farms that the Puritan ancestors who had moved into the valley had carved into the landscape. And you would see, if we're just 100 years ago, the 1920s, the beginnings of telephone lines and electricity being run into the valley, into Enfield proper. And you would have said, well, this is amazing. What a special little place. And if you went down to Enfield Common, Enfield, the biggest of the towns there, well, for a moment, your eyes would have to adjust, right? You would say, everything here looks so old. It looks so strange to me. I can't really place it. But then your eyes would adjust after a few minutes, and you would say, well, I mean, that's a church. I know what a church is. Be the Congregational Church down on the Common. You say, okay, that stately brick building, that must be Town Hall, right? That makes sense. And then you would look a little more, and you would say, oh, well, there's the butcher, and there's the post office, and the billiards hall, and the general store. And you'd say, okay, I know this place. It's not so strange to me. It's not something that I can't relate to. And then you would meet the people there, and they would say, oh, city folk. You can tell by the way you dress, but welcome. Welcome to the Swift River Valley. Welcome to Quabbin. Quabbin is a Nipmuc word. It means well-watered or many-watered place. And the people there would refer interchangeably to where they lived, the Swift River Valley, Quabbin. And who are the people there? Well, just like the town itself, they're no different than you or me. I mean, they're farmers, yes. They're ranchers, they're hunters, but they're more. They're writers, they're poets, they're artists. I like to say there's the artistic legacy of the Swift River Valley. You can go to New York City to the public library and see those incredible lion statues out there. They were sculpted by a man from Enfield, Massachusetts. The whole life of the valley continued out. And of course, now, that life, that legacy, is buried under 400 billion gallons of water. An astonishing number to hear, because all of that life, all of that vivacity, you can't see anymore. You still see something beautiful, yes. I'd like to tell one of my favorite stories of people in the valley. There's this woman who lived there. She was born in the valley. Her family lived there for generations. Her name was Nellie Brown, and she was a school teacher. She left the valley and headed to Maine, where she actually founded the state kindergarten system there. An enormous accomplishment for a woman at the beginning of the century. And she came back to the town with her companion, Grace. And the people in the town were like, oh, Nellie Brown is back. I don't trust that woman. She knew everyone. Her family had been there forever. She had her hand in everything. But more than that, she was a universalist. Can't trust that. And she was a women's rights advocate in the 1920s. Then some of you are listening to this story being like, oh, Nellie Brown, okay, that's fine. And some of you are thinking what I'm thinking. Oh, a lesbian. Yes, absolutely. As a bisexual man myself, it does so much for me to know that there were queer people in the valley, in the cracks of history, taking up space, making things happen, making their name known to me here in the present day. In 1895, the people in that valley, people again, just like you and me, people getting into bar fights, people putting personal ads in the newspaper looking for love. In 1895, they saw some men come down the road with a horse-drawn carriage and a bunch of 5-gallon jars. And they watched them go to the Swift River and place those jars into the river and pull the water out. And as they did, and they walked away, they knew those men were not from around here. They were not dressed for the weather. They were just too nice. They were wearing hats and overalls that weren't of the place. They knew these men were from Boston. These men were from Harvard. And these men had been sent by Beacon Hill because the city of Boston was thirsty. The city of Boston, which I will admit to you now, I have some degree of fondness for. The city of Boston was founded on salt and silt and mire and marsh, and it was thirsty from the moment that people first landed from Europe in Massachusetts, and they began to spread their arms out as the city grew, looking for more water, fresh drinking water to pull in to the city as this harbor city grew and grew. And as they got to the end of the 19th century, they said, oh, we can't do this anymore. We can't just keep building these aqueducts out further and further and trying to take what water we can. We need a better solution. And they heard stories from the western part of the state of a valley where the water ran pure. So they sent these men out and had them tested. And they found, yes, the stories were true. This water was pure. This serene place could be bottled up and turned into a reservoir. And the people in 1895, even though it was decades away, they knew that eventually the long arm of Boston would reach 65 miles west and into their valley. In 1927, the time had come. On Beacon Hill, they were debating the Swift River Valley Act. And I told you about the people in the valley. I told you all about how they were just like us, but there was one difference. Maybe it's not different for you, but you need to understand, even by the standards of Western Massachusetts in the Depression, the people in the Swift River Valley were poor. And you need to understand that because that's going to affect the rest of this story. So if you can remember two things, they were just like us and they were poor. Yes, there were mansions built into the sides of the hills. I come from Cape Cod. I can tell you that just because you see incredible wealth does not mean there is not something sullied underneath it all. That there is not darkness and loss and poverty amongst that wealth. So the people there, out on Beacon Hill, they had only their own legislator to speak for them. Nobody else in the entire city would raise the voice to say, you cannot dam up that valley. There are people living there. There are over 2,000 people living there. No. Why would they? Those legislators lived in Boston too, right? They needed water to drink. In 1927, as the act was being deliberated, the people of the 4 towns of the valley got together and they sent a letter to Beacon Hill. And they said, we know what you're doing. We know what's going to happen. Please, whatever you do, make it swift, make it decisive. And within a week it was passed. Soon, the first flood to hit the valley began, not of water, far worse, men. Young men from Harvard and MIT, which did not have the reputation it has today, but these were the finest young men available who didn't have jobs. And they flooded into the valley to begin the great work, the surveying that would take to eventually create Windsor Dam, to redirect all of the water heading into the valley, to put those 400 billion gallons of water down there. These men were referred to pejoratively at times as the engineers. No matter what their job was, they were the engineers. And many people in the valley, people descended from the people who lived in the valley today will tell you, oh, no. We gave no quarter to those men. But you need to remember, 1928, 1929, 1930, this is the Great Depression. And the people who lived in that valley, remember they were poor. And their young children had left the valley to find their fortunes elsewhere, to go to college, to find jobs, because there were none in their homes. And so now you have a house and you have a room that no one is living in, and now here's a young man who needs a room. And he has money. So you let it to him. What else are you going to do? And in the morning, you make breakfast for him. And his friends, as they join, begin to measure your property line and begin to measure the topography of the place that they're going to destroy. They become a part of your life. It's one of the great contradictions of the flooding of Quabbin, that these men who came to destroy could somehow end up being a part of where you live, that they could be your community. Soon they're not strangers, you know their names. You're playing baseball with them, you're playing cards with them, they're attending your church. They're joining the Masonic Lodge, their wives are joining the Order of the Eastern Star, and pretty soon you're introducing your daughters to them. Right? Because these young men have prospects. They went to college. Their families could afford to send them to college. They have a name. They have education. Why not? They become a part of your community. Community is such an important word to me, personally. Now it's back to this. There is I told you I would tell you 2 stories. I'll start with the fun one. We'll move on to the less fun one a little later in the night. A story of mania. If you've never met someone who's manic, it can be scary. It can be bewildering. It can be amusing. I think this particular story was a nice combination of all of those. It was a Wednesday in February of last year. And on Wednesdays I have therapy. I live in Yarmouth, I work in Barnstable on Cape Cod, and I travel to Plymouth in order to go to therapy. So it's kind of like a 40-minute drive from home to work to therapy and back again. This geography is not important. There will be no test. Just in case you were wondering what this journey is like. So I decide one day I'm at work and I can leave early. I've done everything I need to do for the day. Why not get lunch? And I'll head to Plymouth, like Boston, you know, a site of our colonial history, right? Downtown Plymouth, if you've never been, is this beautiful main street, every kind of cuisine you can imagine. So I had many, many options, and I decided to go to Moe's. Moe's is it's kind of a little better than Chipotle, but it's not that special. But I've been there so many times, and it was easy, and there was a nostalgia element to it. And I went down there, and they do this horrible corporate thing. Every time you come in the door, they always say, "Welcome to Moe's." I'm like, please don't. It's weird for both of us. But on this day, I walk in, and I'm the only person there. And when I get that, "Welcome to Moe's," I'm like, oh, there's a little something to it today. A little heat. And as I move through the line, deciding what they're gonna put on my weird, not Taco Bell Crunch Wrap, but still is kind of a Crunch Wrap meal, and they get me all the way to checkout, I'm like, well, they're joking with me. And the customer service is like kind of elevated in this sort of noticeable way. If you've ever been to one of these quick service restaurants, you know what it's like to sort of be dismissed. Where they say, "What do you want on it?" Yeah, go, check out, done, get out of here. No. That's not the vibe at all. And as I'm checking out, I'm like, you know, it's been 40 minutes and I have to go to the bathroom so bad. Do you mind holding my food here? And they say, "Hey, no, tell us where you're sitting. We'll bring it out to you. We'll put it down for you." I'm like, wow. You know, I am somewhat of a customer service expert myself, a professional in the field, and no one ever tells me what a good job I'm doing. So I said, this is worthy of recognition. These people deserve to know what a good job they're doing. So I went up to the counter and I took the manager's business card and I said, I'm going to send that manager an email and say, whoever you had working Wednesday afternoon did such a great job at making me feel welcome, at making me feel like I belong. It's at Moe's, of all places. I mean, the Moe's in Hadley lived for 3 years. So, you know, this was a special place to have lived for this long. And I wanted to tell them that. And if that's where it ended, a friendly email, that would have been, welcome, have a seat wherever you like. If that had been it, it probably would have been fine. But that was not it. Because as I sat back down and I looked at that business card, my mind went back to a sign on the door that said, looking for assistant manager. And I said, oh my God, if I send this email, one of them could be the assistant manager of the Moe's. And that means, oh my God, they could pay off medical debt, they could pay off student loans, they could buy a house in Plymouth of all places, they could raise a child all because of me. Oh my God, I am so good. I am a great human being. There has never been a human being like me. I am a moral Midas. Everything I touch turns to gold. And then I said, oh, I am manic. But it's okay, right? I'm going right to therapy. So I know that it's not going to be a problem because my therapist will fix this. So I get down to my therapist's office, and if you've never been to therapy, one of the most important parts is the ritual, right? It's got to be the same every time. That's how you come, like when you come to the theater, how you know you're sort of in one mode of being, and now you're transported to another. And for me, I pick a chair, and my therapist says, everyone picks the same chair they sat in the first time, and it's certainly true for me. I've never deviated in 10 years from the same chair. He sits down, and he will say, how are you today? Always the same inflection, without variation, for a full decade. So I go and I sit down. And as I sit down, he says, how are you today? And I say, I don't know, I feel like I'm on fire. I feel like there's ants on the inside of my skin and they're crawling out of my ears and I don't know what I'm doing. And he says, okay, you're manic. Okay, let's take some deep breaths. I'm like, I don't know if I can take a deep breath. I don't know, I've never had to breathe before. I don't think I have the lungs that I did at any moment before. Now I need to breathe out gills. And he's like, no, you don't need to breathe out gills. You still got your lungs. He says, you need to go home. And I say, okay. He says, you need to take your emergency medicine. That's this right here. Seroquel. A lot of bipolar people will take this in their lives. It's a mood stabilizer. a lot of people who aren't bipolar will take it for other reasons. That's 100 milligram pills in there. If I take 25 milligrams, I will pass out. That could be a fun experiment. If I do this show again, I'll take some at the beginning of the show and see how long I get before I pass out. But it's important. I'm kind of allergic to it. I'm not supposed to do that. But when you're riding that high, that's kind of a useful side effect, to just fall asleep. So I say, yes, I have my medicine, I'm going to go home. And I start driving home and I say, well, wait a minute. Hold on. I work at a theater, an arts center, and that night they were having an event. They call it the State of the Arts Address. It's a chance for the director to sort of say, hey, here's what's going on at the center, here's what the finances roughly look like, here's what we're looking forward to in the next year, and afterwards there's a question and answer session where a microphone is handed out and people will begin to ask questions, put him on the spot. It's a wonderful time. And my job was to hand out the microphones. And I don't know if you know this looking at me, but I am the best goddamn microphone hander-outer this planet has ever seen. And they couldn't do this without me. I had to be there. My poor wife on the phone is saying, no, someone else can hand out a microphone. And I say, no, they will screw it up. It must be me. I have to be there. So I go and I park behind the building. And as I'm walking in, people are saying, hey, Jason. And I'm saying, yeah. And I walk in the front door and my coworker, she greets me and she says, hey, how you doing? I say, ah, and she says, go home. Go home. So I find my bosses and I go to tell them that I'm going home and they're backstage. And when I greet them, I say, ah, and they say, oh, you need to go home. So I do. I call my wife on the way and I say, I'm heading home, I'm shaking, I don't feel good. And she says, come home, come home. Driving east on Route 28 on Cape Cod in February, the trees are full of snow and the traffic is bad. I don't know if it's construction or just people moving slowly, people worried about ice, who knows what it is, but it wasn't good for me because I began to slow down and my car came to a stop and I said to my wife, I want to take off all my clothes. And she said, do not take off all your clothes. And I said, I want to run naked into the woods. And she said, do not run naked into the woods. And I say, I will become a god. And antlers will grow from my head. And they will reach out, and Spanish moss will dangle from them. And the creatures of the woods will know my name, and they will know that I am their god. And she said, that's fine, but come take your medicine first. So I go home, fully planning on the naked forest god plan, but I'll take the medicine first. And I do what I tend to do when the mania is building. I pace the length of our condo up and down, up and down. I start to call people, just randomly, whoever's next on my phone, call them. They will talk to me. And inevitably, at some point, for some reason, they will always say, hey, is your wife there? And I'll say, yeah. And they say, okay, good. No reason. So I pace and I'm calling and I'm pacing and calling, and then I am asleep for 2 hours. I wake up on the floor and my wife helps me to bed. And I'm out of work for a while, not too long. Typically a manic episode, even unmedicated, doesn't last more than a few days. A depressive episode can last for weeks, but we'll get there later. But while I'm gone, my coworkers go out of their way to make sure everything is taken care of, to make sure that I have nothing to worry about. They're my community. They're the people I rely on to be well. In the Swift River Valley, it is 1935, and their community is disintegrating. In the heart of the Depression, these men from Boston come bearing checks to say, we're here to take your property. Here's what it's worth. And they look at it and say, my great-great-grandfather created this farm. And you're paying me pennies on the dollar for what I could get not 5 years ago. And they say, oh well, take it. This is all you're going to get. And again, here in the middle of the Depression, they did. And they took those checks to Ware and to Belchertown. They headed to Amherst and Northampton and Springfield and said, I was a farmer, and this piece of paper is all that I am worth. Can I be a farmer here? Can I be a shopkeeper here? And they would say, no, but you can live in my attic, and you can work for me for the rest of your life. The very heart of them was gone. And for the ones who were still there, the ones who remained, the ones whose property hadn't been surveyed yet, or the ones who were stubbornly hanging on and refusing to leave, they saw another wave of men from the east. And these men were not the well-dressed men of Harvard and MIT. No. These were desperate men. They were hungry men. These were the woodpeckers. These were men who had the very good foresight to vote for the mayor of Boston, who made sure there was pork enough to go around that they might have jobs on the Quabbin Reservoir project. And they came in with their saws and axes that they were never trained on, and they cut down every tree in the valley. I mean, some of them were small enough that they would just tear them right out of the ground. But they began to level everything, because the heart of this project was to do everything they could to remove any bit of organic matter that they could to create a pure watershed. So they took down the trees. The ones that they could, they would chop into lumber and give back to the Commonwealth to sell elsewhere. Others would be put into big piles and lit ablaze by a woodpecker's match. And it's not just the trees, the houses too, the ones made of wood. There's stories. Just today, when I was down at the dam, I heard a little girl saying, "You mean there's houses down there now?" And I had to say, no, there's nothing down there now. Nothing but stone foundations, because the people who could afford it would move their homes, dismantle them, take them elsewhere, and rebuild somewhere else. But that was few and far between. Most of them watched their houses go up at a woodpecker's match. And not just the trees, and not just the homes, the topsoil itself, that rich woodland soil, had to be dug up. Some of it became a part of the 500,000 tons of earth that make up Windsor Dam. Some of it was just transported out of the valley, but what was left was barren land. The streams and the ponds, those beautiful clear places, they trawled them to remove the fish, which, if you know Quabbin today, is still wild. There's plenty of fish in there now, but they did what they could to remove any semblance of living matter. And I'm not just talking about what's above the ground. I'm talking about what's below it too. You and your family lived somewhere for 200 years. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-parents, they're buried beneath the earth. I like to think that the Water Commission tried to do this process in as respectful a way as they could, but mistakes were made. They had to find every person they could buried under the ground and disinter them. For people who were newly buried, they would just take the coffin out of the ground and transport it away, get a stipend to their closest living relatives to say, well, inter them wherever you want. For those who were older, in older boxes, aged corpses, they fell to pieces as they were pulled out of the ground and had to be put into new boxes. And they had to find who was the closest living relative of these people, and some had none. And for the people who did receive that stipend, they had to say, I can barely afford to live. You want me to take care? You want me to find a plot for my grandfather? I can't do it. So they had a solution you can still see today. Quabbin Park, the cemetery, out on Route 9. If you haven't been, it's worth the trip, just a little drive. Because you will see 300 years worth of people mixed together with tombstones, no lie, 2 weeks old, all buried amongst themselves. And as the waters began to rise, they had to move quicker and quicker on this project. There were people who couldn't find the remains of their loved ones until the 1980s. But you can go see them now in Quabbin Park. It's a surreal place to be, to see these ancient headstones amongst brand new marble. But again, it's one of the contradictions. I mean, even the woodpeckers themselves were a kind of contradiction. Like, they formed a community themselves. They would take all of this brush they were gathering and build these sort of houses, these little domes out of it, and they would hide from their supervisors inside the brush and play card games. You know, get some gambling money that they could take out to Springfield and drink as soon as they could. And they even created a newspaper. I love this fact. They created a newspaper called I Saw You and I Axed You. Perfection. Especially when you consider how these untrained men were losing fingers and hands and arms and lives to these saws and axes that they didn't know how to use. When their time had finished, the commission looked at the work they did and said, oh, we need to hire professionals or this will never be done on time. But hey, they started the work, right? They began the process of moving all of these organic material out of preparing a wasteland. If you were there 10 years prior, your best bet on getting into the valley was the rabbit trail, the rabbit run. It was called that not because of what it looked like. It didn't have any sort of lagomorphic appearance to it. It was called that because of the way it behaved. And the way it behaved was, well, it would start and then stop, and then start and then stop. Not because it's getting to its pre-appointed stops, because, well, imagine that you're on the train and everything is sort of in bloom and beautiful, and there's these little girls who went to school outside of the valley, and they say, engineer, please stop the train. There's wildflowers, we want to go picking. And the engineer would say, absolutely, bring the train to a stop. And they would run out, and everyone inside, I'm sure there were some curmudgeons, right? There always is, but everyone else is looking at them and saying, oh, that's our future. Look at them, this is a sign of hope. And they would get back on, and they would give these wildflower bouquets to the people on the train, and the engineer would start it up again. And not before too long, Earl in the back of the train would say, hey, engineer, stop. And he'd say, absolutely. And Earl would say, I don't want to walk home today. And he would hop over the wall and the briar patch and walk through the trees to his house. But now, the ties of that trail have been torn off the ground. And now the wildflowers are nothing but desolation. And now you can see through the trees to the stone foundations where Earl's house once stood. Everything is falling apart. Their community is diminishing in front of their eyes. In 1937, the Enfield Common is, the people who live there still need the amenities there, right? So it's one of the last places to be taken apart. And there's some men there, it's night. They're in one of the remaining buildings and they hear a sound at the door. And they go, and they open the door, and there's a man, young man, a woodpecker. You can tell instantly. And he says, your town hall's on fire. And then he hops in the waiting car with two of his friends, and they zoom off into the night. And these men rush outside, and they look to the town hall, and they say, it's fine. It's a brick building. It's fine. And then they look the other way, at the Congregational Church, ablaze. Later, they would find the rags soaked in gasoline that started this fire, but they would never find who did it. And their instinct is to run into there, save what they can. Who knows what's still in there, but the fire is raging. They can't even get close. They watch as the antique weather vane falls from the steeple and lies mangled on the ground. They watch as the walls collapse and the 200-year-old pews that their ancestors built fall into the basement and snap in half. Only their pipe organ survived. And they called for help. They did, but they don't have a fire department anymore. There's no one there, so they call to Ware and to Belchertown and say, please, send whatever you can. And they do. They send their tanks, and it's too late. The building is gone. Everything around it is evacuated. They save what they can, but all they lose is the church. And I want to be clear, for those of you who may or may not be religiously inclined, it's not just a church, right? Almost everyone in that valley was christened there. Almost everyone who lived in that valley was married there, and almost everyone who died, their last rites were said in that building. It was their community. And there were people who watched it burn and said, who cares? In 6 months, it would be gone anyway. And there were other people who said, that was our home. That was our community. And it's gone. It's not just a building, it's a sign. It's a symbol. And it's funny how these symbols work in our modern day. You probably drive past these places. You might even drive past this library and say, the library, I'm so glad it's in town, and you haven't been in here in years. It wouldn't surprise me if that were true, because these places, they're just signs to us. And once that church was gone, they began to hold services in the town hall, and the attendance tripled easily, because now you can't just look and say, we're a good place, we have a church, because it's gone. You don't have an excuse anymore. And now that that sign of your community is gone, you have to find it in the people around you. 2/3 of the population of the valley in 1937 is already gone. The remainder would come to town hall together to pray. I'm envious of that. I'm envious that they had that in their lives. Growing up, I was a person of faith myself. I was raised Catholic, and I had aspirations of being a priest one day. But, this got in the way. When I was attending UMass, before I dropped out, I began to experience my bipolar disorder for the first time. I would have visions in the heart of my mania. I would speak to God. Not God, I was Catholic. I would speak to the saints who would speak to God on my behalf. I would see signs in the stars. St. Peter himself telling me, you are good. You are blessed. You are chosen. I don't know if you know what that's like to hear St. Peter tell you that you're special, but it feels damn good. It feels really good. But I started to lose control of my life, and I had nowhere else to turn except to this. And once I started taking this, stopped like that. It was all up here. And when I finally dropped out, and I went home, and I was unemployed, and I was taking that Seroquel, I told you how it makes me pass out. It also makes it impossible for me to wake up. I would have to wake up 11, 12 o'clock, 1 in the afternoon, and I would be groggy. I couldn't deal with this medicine. I couldn't find a job. I couldn't figure out what was going to happen to me. And it meant that I couldn't go to Mass on Sunday morning. And the church would have seen that as okay. I would have gotten dispensation for a medical reason. I would have been okay as far as my sins were concerned, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that I felt fine. I did not feel like a sinner. I did not feel like I had lost my connection to the divine. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to feel about not having that connection to God. And then I began to ask myself hard questions, questions that if I looked in the usual places for the answers, I would find none. And the hardest question of all, why would my loving God create a man who in the heart of his mania and depression could hurt people so gravely, who could do things he regretted so much, who would lose his ethical center? Why make a man like that? And I had to look elsewhere for the answer. It was very hard for me to make that adjustment. Eventually I came off the Seroquel, I found other medications, but I never went back to church. I had to find some other place where people will sit in rows and listen to a man talk for an hour. And I found them. I had to force it a little, yes, but I found those places. But there is something that the theater cannot give, that church can. And I'm so sorry, those of you who came late, this is the part where I ask for some audience participation. The one thing that I miss more than anything else from church was the sign of peace. an opportunity to turn to the people near you and say, in essence, hi, I hope you're okay. I hope things are going well for you. Well, now it's our turn. I want you to turn to the people near you. You don't have to say anything other than, hi, I'm Jason, it's nice to meet you. Insert your name here. But take a moment, I will watch as all of you do it, and we will not move on with the show until you have greeted the people near you. Hi, I'm Jason. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Karen.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Hi, Peg, I'm Karen. How's it going?
Hi, in the back, I won't come. I'm Jason, it's nice to see you all.
Hi, I'm Meredith.
Hi Meredith, I'm Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Meredith, we were in class yesterday together.
Thank you. After the opening, that's my second favorite part of the show. You don't get to do that too often, do you? You walked in here strangers, and now you at least know a couple names, right? You have more of a community than you did before, even if just for a moment, even if just for tonight. I would like to tell you the other story now. I would like to tell you the story not of the mania, but of the depression. This also took place last year, last November and December. I was depressed. And the thing about depression as compared to mania, I mean, it's so weird to call them bipolar because they're not really that related. Mania is so interesting. I mean, it's scary, sure, it's very weird, yes, but it's interesting. Depression's boring. It sucks. Nothing happens. And it just carries on that way for weeks and weeks. And I had to take time off work because I couldn't get out of bed. And my poor, long-suffering wife had to say, how do we feel about eating today? And I said, I don't want to. And she would say, I know, but you're going to. It takes more than medicine to make a person feel well. They have to sleep, they have to eat. I can't drink, which sucks, but that's part of the process, right? That's part of the wellness. And it takes community. And I tell you, when you're depressed, you might have met people going through all sorts of trauma or grief or just sadness. And you come up to them and you give them a hug and you say, I'm so sorry for what's happening to you. And they say, well, thank you. I still feel like crap, but thank you. You come up to a bipolar depressed person. You put your arms around them. Say, I'm sorry for what you're going through. And you step away and you get nothing.
Huh?
They're not there. There's nothing there. And that's the hardest part about being married to someone like that. That all of a sudden you can just lose them for weeks at a time. You see them, you see something that looks like them, but they're not there. You lose them and you lose them and you lose them. And you just hope to find them again. And in the meantime, you do the hard work of trying to keep them alive. And this December, my long-suffering wife said to me, I don't care how depressed you are. It's December. We have a tradition. Traditions are important. And you need to go outside. And you need to move. So we are going to Gardens Aglow. Gardens Aglow takes place at the beautiful Heritage Museum and Gardens in Sandwich, Massachusetts on Cape Cod. It's an incredible place. If you're ever on Cape Cod and you're looking for something to do, go to Heritage. Doesn't matter the season, there's something happening. They've got this beautiful antique car museum and this restored carousel and these beautiful, beautiful gardens. They're famous for their hydrangeas if you want to take a look there. And in the wintertime, if you get your tickets early enough, you can go to Gardens Aglow, where they string Christmas lights across the entire property. Everything imaginable is covered in them. And you go with your wife and you walk among the lights and you say, I think that one's new. That's kind of it. I mean, you get a donut at the end, so you look at the lights and there's a donut, but it's great. It's wonderful. And if you couldn't tell, my beloved wife is on the diminutive side. So normally when we're walking anywhere, I have to modulate my gait in order that we might walk side by side. But that's not the problem now. Now, she walks as slowly as she can, because this is as fast as I will move. But we go. And the next day, I go to her and I say, I feel better. Not good. No, not good at all, but better. Something had shifted. And I miss my friends. I miss my coworkers. I tell you, everyone thinks their first instinct, oh, he's depressed, give him space. No, smother him. My God, he's all alone in the world. But they do, they back off. And why wouldn't they? It's not like I'm going to them and saying, hey, these are what my needs are. No, I'm going to them and just crying and then walking away. So I decide, you know what, it's time. I need to share what's going on with me. I need to actually reach out. So I do kind of what I'm doing in front of you right now. I tell the story. I sit in front of my computer and I record myself. And I say, okay, this is a message of hope. I mean, things aren't good yet, but clearly the tide is turning and I want people to know. So I sit and I hit record. And again, in my head, this is a message of hope. But what people see is I don't want to die as much as I did yesterday. Which is not interpreted that hopefully by its audience. But you know what? It fucking worked. It worked. People came out of the woodwork to say, hey man, are you okay? And I had to be like, no. But thank you for asking. And I talked to people I hadn't spoken to in decades who came out and said, hey, I saw your video on Facebook. What's up? Remember me? We went to high school together. And I said, of course I remember you. I remember everything. I'm a freak of nature. And I exchanged words. And we had these connections come back, this life returned, and it helped. Going to the light show helped. Making the scary video helped. Talking to these people helped. My community came back to me. But I tell you what's hard about depression. What's hard about depression is every time it comes back, you have to go through this again. You have to do this whole process. You wouldn't know it looking at me. I'm depressed right now. If this show were scheduled a week ago, it would not be happening. I spent 12 hours last Saturday sitting on my couch, except for one break to go to the bathroom, because I could not move otherwise. And I had to sit and say, okay, I have this thing that fulfills me, but I want to disappear. I don't want to do anything at all. But I had people who insisted, no, you need to be a part of the world. It's so important. And so I did. And so I'm here with you now. And tomorrow I might say I feel even better than I do today, or I might collapse on the floor. I don't know, but I made it to this day. So thank you for coming. My celebratory welcome home party that you all are. It's good to be here. In the valley, it's time for people to start saying goodbye. It's time for us to let go of the few people in our lives who remain. And in 1938, in April, a decision was made. Well, we need to throw a party, right? I mean, I know these are the ancestors of Puritans, but like, yeah, they need to have a party. They need to say, let's go out with a bang. So they sent invitations to everyone who remains in the valley, and word got out to where in Belchertown, and the people who still had contacts. And remember, this is in the days before Facebook and cell phones and all these things. People could leave the valley and you would never see them again. But people like Nellie Brown, who had connections to everyone, they got these invitations out and they said, come to town hall on the 27th. And I don't know if you're party people. I mean, you're here on a Friday night. I can make some assessments of that. But if you are, or even if you aren't, this is the kind of party you would want to be at. If you were into dancing, Well, there's a big dance floor in Town Hall. You can see all the young people out there on the floor, doing the latest jigs and reels, kicking up their heels. Some of the engineers and their new wives that they've found since coming to the valley will become the kings and queens of the ball. And over here, a bunch of tables are set up with pies. That's where I'd be, over the pie tables, because they're going to have a pie tasting contest. You can actually see a picture from the newspaper at the time of a young person who has just put a pie under the seat of one of the judges, and she has sat down on it. You can find the picture of her brushing cherries off of her dress while people are laughing all around. There's humor, there's conviviality, people are having a good time. And if that's not your scene, if you like a little more quiet, a little subdued, well, you can find a dark corner and see someone who moved to Amherst and say, I haven't seen you in a year. How are you? I miss you. And if you are inside a town hall at the time, if you're one of the 300 people in the building, you're probably also starting to do a little bit of this. Because if you leave to go to the outhouse, to go to the bathroom, well, there's 1,000 people outside. And they are waiting to take your spot. So as soon as you're out, boom, they've taken their spot. And it's people from all over the valley, people who want a party, people from all the surrounding towns, lots of journalists. They're like, ooh, I smell a human interest piece. I've got to go to the Swift River Valley. And so they come from everywhere, and they're waiting for a chance to get in. And the party is fun. It's raucous. The pies are delicious. At least I like to imagine that they are when I tell this story. And the party goes on, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Silence. The bell in Town Hall starts to ring. Musicians put down their instruments. You can hear the clatter of forks by the pies, the dancing stops. First one person starts to weep, then another. Stoic men begin to cry openly because the towns of Quabbin are no more. It is April 28th, 1938. The final day. And now you're looking at your friend from Enfield that you came here with. And now she's your friend from nowhere. And soon she won't be your friend at all. You'll be gone. And the people start to disperse one by one in drips, and then finally a great exodus. People return to their homes that they know will be gone within a year, or they leave the valley never to come back. There's other goodbyes. 1937, they hold the last winter pageant in the valley. I mean, if you went to this thing, it would look like our parties do today, right? There's craft beer, sure. There's hot chocolate, there's mulled cider and wine, and there's all of these people gathered together, and their songs and their stories, and the engineers and their friends put on a play. A fucking Christmas Carol. That play that haunts every actor for their entire life. I don't measure my life by graduations, by marriages. No, I measure it by, I'm playing Tiny Tim, and now I'm playing Nephew Fred, and now I'm playing Bob Cratchit, and now I'm playing Scrooge. And now the specter of Christmas yet to come has come for me. But what a great play to go out on, right? That's the last play performed in the valley. And this thing that reminds us of the past, the present, and the future. It just feels right. It makes me as an actor feel connected to that time and that place, because they didn't have a beautiful stage, right? They didn't have some grand proscenium theater. No, they had a room like this to perform in. God bless us, everyone, the whole kit and caboodle. All of these people coming together. If you were one of the few remaining people who lived in the valley in 1938, 1939, the Commonwealth slowly ushering you out, you would have heard the sound of steam shovels, and you would have seen bright floodlights down at Windsor Dam as that earthen mound rose higher and higher. 24 hours a day, 364 days a year. They took a day off for Christmas, and that's it. They were working on that dam, and you would hear the sound of those steam shovels as you knew the end was coming. And I want you to imagine that you're one of the people who decided to move to where, right? So you're right outside of the valley. And you can still hear the ringing of those shovels. And as the dam finishes in 1939 and the waters start to rise, you try to forget your home. You try to focus on your future. 1939, 1940, 1941, December. The United States is at war. Westover Air Force Base decides that, and I guess it's good that they did, they need a place to train their bomber pilots. And what would be so fantastic is if they had a huge stretch of land that they knew not a living thing was on, that they knew no one was going to trespass on, that they could go and practice. And you could go to the administration building and look north and watch those planes dive out of the sky and drop their bombs on what was once your home, once your neighbor's homes. And if you go home to where you'll hear those bombs in the night, haunting you like those steam shovels did. And I tell you all this because it's important to know that as awful as that sounds, as sort of horrible as those series of circumstances are, as beautiful as those moments of community are, you need to remember this was not the first time that people had been displaced from that valley. After it was carved by retreating glaciers, just like my own home of Cape Cod was deposited 10,000 years ago, the Nipmuc people lived there 4,000 years ago. And they made the mistake of allying with the Wampanoag from where I live in King Philip's War, and they lost. And Boston decided to give the veterans of that war the land that they had just chased the people living there off of. We still call it by the name they gave it. Even today, if you've been paying attention to the news from the eastern part of the state, they're expanding our bridges, right? These crumbling edifices. And they just told people this year, by the way, you're going to have to move. Displacement continues. And those people will be given checks, but even now they're saying, I can't move. I raised my family here. My business, I run it out of my basement. I can't just up and move. And they say, well, we need a clear lot where your home once was, so we can park the equipment to build this bridge. And isn't it so interesting how the way it works throughout time? It's always the poor and it's always the marginalized who are asked to move. They never go to a billionaire and say, hey, your mansion would be a great place for an oil pipeline. Get out. What a funny coincidence that that's how the world works. I don't know what the answer is, because I tell you, I went to Quabbin today before here and needing some inspiration, I guess, after the hundreds of times I've been there before. And I told you before, if you had been there 100 years ago and you had descended into that valley, you would have said it was beautiful. I tell you, if you go today, you will still say it's beautiful. The leaves are starting to change. It's gorgeous. The water reflected the setting sun beautifully. There were all these Canada geese flying around, honking at each other. It was full of life. It's full of light. And I don't know about you, maybe you have a different opinion. I don't know, this far west from the city, but I kind of like Boston. It's all right. And I guess they need drinking water. What would they have done otherwise? My only point here is I am just one crazy man. I don't have solutions to these things. I barely have the medication I need to get up and tell you about them. All I can wonder is if displacement is an inevitability. If eventually people have to be moved to make way for a future. Why are they not treated with the utmost kindness? Why are they not given every respect possibly afforded to them? The last meeting of the Quabbin Club, which was a women's social group in the valley in 1937, they came together. It is the kind of group, they do picnics and bingo nights and that kind of thing. They came together and they told stories from their time in the valley, knowing this would be the last meeting. They shared letters they'd written to friends, or friends had written to them. They shared journal entries, short stories and poems. And finally, they finished. They finished with a prayer. That prayer Very simple. Lord, let us not forget to be kind. That is all for tonight. Thank you. Thank you all so much.